This week, we're joined by Marine Corp Veteran and Southeast U.S. Rep with Hobie, Cory Dreyer. Stay tuned while we talk about kayaks, kayak fishing, and everything you might want to know about it.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the OneCast. Here, with myself, Pete. I'm with Ben and Trey, as always. We have a guest on the line who we'll introduce here in a minute. But first, as always, we want to throw you that shameless plug for OneCast Fishing and our new snagless line of jigs, as well as the long neck hooks, which if you haven't tried them yet, they continue to prove your usefulness. And, it's not something we'd originally designed for release, but it's really worked out for the anglers.
And they are a bed fishing ultimate rig. I mean, it's hard to beat. I put it to work this week. But yeah, make sure you go to onecastfishing.com, join the Snagless Revolution, use the code the OneCast, and we've already had several people use that code, and we definitely appreciate it. And so that saves you 10%. So use the code OneCast on there on checkout and join the Snagless Revolution.
Yeah, and speaking of OneCast Fishing and the OneCast crew here, if you're going to be in Knoxville at the Bassmaster Classic here in about two and a half weeks now.
Yep.
Yeah, if you're going to be there, make sure you stop by and say, hey, booth 4013. If you're a fan of the show, stop by, say hi. If you're a fan of the product, stop by and say hi. If you haven't seen the product, come see it. We'll have some classic specials, get you a little bit of a better deal, or, try them out and see if you like them. And then you can stock up using that code, the OneCast. So without dragging it too far, we could get into bad tournaments this weekend for Trey and I and all kinds of good stuff. But we have Cory Dreyer here with us this week, Southeast representative for Hobie. I'm not sure, is it just the kayaks, or are you doing the eyewear and all of Hobie?
So I do eyewear and kayaks.
Okay, cool. So this is Cory Dreyer. Cory, you want to tell a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got started in fishing, and then I know you were a boat angler for a long time, then got into the kayak, so kind of how you transitioned or what got you into that.
Absolutely. So name's Cory Dreyer. Grew up in Tampa Bay area of Florida. And down there, did a ton of inshore fishing as well as bass fishing. Growing up, had a boat with the dad and family, and honestly, I started fishing when I was in a crib, flats fishing for trout and redfish and stuff like that. So later on in life, joined the Marine Corps, was down at Camp Lejeune, did 4 years, and went to school for a couple years. Moved back with my now wife. Sabrina, she's from North Carolina, and we moved back to the Safety Harbor, Clearwater area of Florida. And in 2006, I got my first kayak. That's when it really started to take off down there for inshore. And so I started fishing reds and trout, snook, and things like that, getting in the backwaters, and it just really opened up my world. Was ease of use. Throw it in the bed of a truck, on top of a car, whatever, can go anywhere, versus hooking up the boat and things like that. And also that was kind of my therapy, so to speak. Getting on the water and really helped me out, after I came back from Iraq and other places and things. So, but yeah, so that's how I started kayak fishing. Moved back to North Carolina. And prior to moving back here, I had sold my kayak, and when I got here, it was like a year and a half, and I didn't have a kayak, didn't have a boat. My father-in-law had a boat. We did some fishing around locally. And so I ended up buying a kayak and started competing on the tournament trail in 2012, and really haven't slowed down since. So I started with Kayak Bass Fishing, the KBF trail, now fish the Hobie and some of the Bassmaster events. So also started one of the largest clubs in North Carolina for kayak fishing called Carolina Kayak Anglers. And now I'm just an advisor there. I'm too busy with family and work and stuff like that. And, it's a time suck. So
yeah,
it's takes a lot.
When were you in the Marine Corps?
I was in the Marine Corps from 2000 to 2004.
And were you at Lejeune the whole time?
I was.
So my dad was in the Marine Corps at the time, so I was real little, but we moved from Lejeune in 2001. So we were actually there probably the same time, just different capacities. Did you ever fish New River?
I did a little bit,
Yeah.
but honestly, I wasn't at Lejeune a whole lot.
Yeah.
Deployments and stuff like after September 11th, like
Yeah.
operational tempo. I was a grunt, so I was in the infantry, and we were gone constant. Between going to Japan, to Okinawa, and being deployed from there, and as soon as I got back, switched units, went to Iraq, Kosovo a few times, and Africa. Kind of went everywhere, but it's a good time. So I didn't get a whole lot of fishing in.
I think you hear that a lot out of the veteran community. People ask like, how did you get into fishing, or why do you fish, or why do you enjoy the outdoors? And the reality is it's extremely therapeutic, and that's not just for veterans; it's for people across the board. But I think a lot of times that's a missing story. We talk about we competitive edge and technology, and we love to just fish or whatever. But the reality is even if I'm dead last in the tournament, I was out on the water. It was therapeutic for me. So appreciate you saying that. Appreciate your service, man.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Obviously both Trey and Trey's still active duty with the Army, and Ben's retired, but so we have a deep respect for the military. And I'm with Trey. I know. My brother in Wyoming does some veteran hunts every year and helps, get guys in the outdoors. And like Trey says, Trey with Hero Harvest here locally, which if you're around April 1st, I don't know if you know, but they have a tournament on Sharon Harris. If you register, they put you with a vet and you go out, and it's just kind of a fun deal. So we can talk about that a little bit offline if you want, if you're going to be around. But Trey helps organize that to get vets on the water. And I think it really is an untapped to its full potential to help veterans. I know there's some other guides and things that are vets that are starting to do their own stuff and take people out, and they're starting to realize how important it is. But I don't know that it's tapped as well as it should be. So
yeah, it's a continuous effort for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you started with the KBF. Obviously, you've had success. If you look at the wall behind you,
nice backdrop.
In kayak fishing. I know the elk hunt was great this past fall. I got to see you right before you went out there and saw the pictures. Kind of got to take your son out of school for a while, and he got to experience that and write about everything. So the outdoors is a big part of your life.
And for those who are just listening, aren't watching the video version, we're looking at Cory in his office there on screen. He's got a third place KBF tour up there, or second place. I can't see the other ones. I see champion up top. Got a lot of hardware hanging up there on the wall, which is outstanding.
We need to do an MTV Cribs series on Cory's house. Let's do that.
we get Jody on too and do his. All you guys.
My best friend's Jody. Yeah, you guys want to go? He's the goat, man.
Jody's.
He's on another level.
He's invited Chelsea and I up to stay and fish with him, and we got to make that happen because he's got a really cool story up there. But this isn't about him. We're here to talk about you. So obviously, the outdoors is a big part of your life and has been. You started out fishing, Marine Corps, continued to fish, kayak angling. Your first job in the industry wasn't with Hobie, but how did you kind of get started working in the fishing industry? Or in the outdoor space? I'm not exactly sure if the company I first met you when you were with is who you started with or not, but how'd you kind of get your foot in the door, start into the industry? Was it from your success fishing or?
No, actually, I worked for Energizer Battery Company, and they did massive layoffs, and it was from the bottom to the top, and I missed the first 2 rounds and then got axed as the last person on the third round. Mm-hmm. So I was looking for a job, and I had a relationship with one of the kayak shops in Greensboro called Get Outdoors. Mm-hmm. And Will Seeley reached out to me and, offered me a position up there to, being a kayak angler. They didn't have anybody. They're more whitewater and wreck guys. So, and that's when kayak fishing really was starting to take off. So I worked with those guys for about 5 years as a assistant manager, buyer. I kind of did everything there. And met a lot of the reps in the industry and, on the paddle sports side of things. So I ended up landing a job with Confluence Outdoor, which is Wilderness Systems, Perception, Boardworks, and a couple other brands. And they're based out of Greenville, South Carolina. So I was a rep with them for 5 years and recently just started with Hobie kayaks. And that was kind of a goal of mine all along. They've had some restructuring in the organization, and they used to have independent reps, and they brought everybody in-house, and that opened up an opportunity for me to get a position with them. So I left Confluence and started 3 weeks ago with Hobie.
Oh, wow.
And so I've been with Hobie in Hobie kayaks for a long time. I've owned 4 over the years, and honestly, it's the best fishing kayak out there, the Pro Angler, in my opinion. And it was hard for me to work for another company and not want to fish out of that boat, or being able to. Not taking in, discrediting Wilderness Systems. They make great boats as well, but there's just something about the Pro Angler with their Mirage drive and the stability of the boat and just the layout. It's more like a mini bass boat. And being a boat angler as well, I didn't really tap into that at all when I was talking about my background. I boat fish too. I fished 1 year in the Toyota Series in the Central Division, and that didn't go as well as I thought it was going to, but that's part of fishing. But I fish locally, a lot of the big bass things with Brad Staley and some of the local little wildcat deals around. So so that's kind of my background on how I got into the industry with fishing cattle sports. So after you got out of the Marine Corps, you said you went to school for a couple of years. Did you do anything civilian education wise to get yourself more marketable within the outdoor space, or anything like that, or was it just relationships, or the combination of both? It was a combination of both. So I went to school for a business degree, like business management, and ended up going to Pitt Community College down by ECU. And my wife was at ECU at the time, and then went to school at St. Pete College back home in Florida. So
okay. Yeah, I think that's important for a lot of the listeners and stuff. Like you don't necessarily have to be, go to school for fishing. Like the collegiate level anglers, like they have a degree. It's not, I don't know if it's a fishing degree. I don't think that's a real thing, right? But it's a degree that like makes you marketable within the outdoor space. And it's important for you to understand, like, there's so many opportunities to be in the outdoor space, and it's not necessarily just pro fishing. Right?
Yeah, as we talk to more folks that work in the outdoor industry and fishing and hunting and different types, you'll see, like, if you're a young person listener, even somebody that's already in a career and wants to transition, sales, business, those types of educations, that's what, and Cory could tell you in the industry. To get in with these companies, those are the kind of positions they have. They have folks out there beating pavement, selling their product. They have marketing folks, things like that. So just outside of angling, which, obviously can help. We had Mike Corbersley on a few episodes ago. He made those relationships with Lowrance fishing through college, got a marketing degree and led to a job in the industry. Cory, through the Marine Corps, has a business background, education, built relationships, was able to propel that to now the job that he's always wanted with Hobie Kayak. So there's more than just being an angler. I know when I was a kid, I thought the only way you were going to the Bassmaster Classic and all that stuff was by fishing and being, one of those top 100 guys in the world to fish at that level. And knowing what I know now, I probably would have done some things a little bit differently in my younger years. But I'm fortunate to be in the position I am with the companies that I do have a relationship with OneCast. We've started this, and meeting folks like Cory and that have been huge. But
it's all relationships and marketing. In business, just having that business background, because fishing's only a part of it. You hear that from the elite pros and everybody out there. There's a whole lot more to it than just catching bass. So.
I think you bring up a good point. There's a whole lot to it more than just catching bass. You actually don't have to be that great, right? Let's think about it. A lot of guys will put themselves against the pro anglers, and when they come into town, they'll be like, oh, I can beat that guy. Well, of course you can, because you spent 40 years fishing Falls Lake. Like, no kidding, right? Yeah. But that guy that you say you can beat is most likely better than you at breaking down a body of water, most likely better than you at marketing and sales for the company that is supporting him or her through the industry, and most likely has a resume that speaks volumes to a company that says, I can't just put I catch fish on a resume. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense, right? Like, of course you need to produce some results, but when you walk across the stage, they're looking at, like, how is this person, are they presentable? Are they communicating our narrative and our message? Are they marketing our product effectively? Yeah, sure. Somebody bombs a tournament. No big deal, right? So it's not just about catching fish, is it?
Not at all.
Can you?
So there's a whole lot more to it.
Can you talk a little bit, Cory, about before we get into like kayak selection stuff, like you're like self-marketing, because you have to market yourself, right? Like Trey was alluding to, you have to make yourself valuable to the companies that you work with or you want to work with. So for you, outside of just tournament success, how have you marketed yourself, whether it be through social media or things like that? What is it that you've done to kind of draw the eye of the companies that you want to work with?
Social media is a huge part of it. I don't have the biggest social media following. You know, I have a couple thousand on Instagram. But it's being a good representative of the sport as well as marketing on social media. I mean, that's where it's at. Helping out at boat shows, doing events, seminars, things in person. You know, that's what I've personally done to help myself grow and get sponsors like Cashin, Z-Man, you know, Catch, Torpedo, all there. I have a list of people that I work with, but that's how I've made myself more marketable. Just being a good representative of the sport, because there's a lot of people out there that don't represent themselves well outside of, you know, tournaments and things like that. It's an everyday thing. Yeah. So people watch. I've realized that over the years is people watch, and they watch very closely, especially if you've ever had any success. They they go through everything with a fine-tooth comb, and you know there's haters out there, but you gotta.
It's like they're digging through Cory's background during the political campaign. Like, hey, what skeletons does he have in his closet?
That's right.
Yeah. And you realize, like, going to these shows and you meet somebody for the first time that's with a company that you may use their stuff a lot. You know, you might be on their Facebook groups. Those folks watch what goes on in those communities, and if you're helpful and you talk to people, and we talked about this in our pro staff deal episode, like, they look at that stuff. And I have had companies that I've helped people in their forums and stuff, and you know, they meet me and they're like, oh, you know, you're in the group, I remember you, so and so had a question, you gave them really good advice about this. And they notice that kind of stuff. So if you're in there being one of these internet tough guys telling people, oh, if you don't know how to use it, maybe you should do something else and blah blah blah, those companies notice that too. So that was kind of what I wanted to get to Cory on. That was you know, folks, look, I'm sure Hobie watches their socials. I know, you know, a lot of the big companies do. So being a good person, basically, like we've talked about.
A steward of the profession. If you wouldn't mind, a question from your military service, and this goes out to either the people that are actively serving or maybe some of the veteran community. Did serving in the Marine Corps and you know, gaining some of those values that the Corps had in ethics and morals, did any of that translate over into how you are a steward of the profession of fishing now?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when I was in, you know, Marine Corps, military in general, wants you to be professional at all times. You know, so it's one of those things that easily translated over to the fishing industry for me. You know, being a good person, you know, especially in the public eye, behind it as well, but in the public eye, just being a good person. But yeah, your morals, having a good solid moral
compass.
You know, compass, yeah.
And the people you surround yourself with, I mean, you take that into account. Like Cory was talking about his good friend Jody. I know of at least once, and I believe it's happened more than once, where he's DQ'd himself because of something. I know there was one where he had forgot to put his PFD in. I think it was last year. Forgot to put his PFD on, which is a rule. Went out there, was fishing, realized he didn't put it on, immediately called the tournament director and be like, hey, I'm out. He disqualified himself because he violated that rule. So
he was by himself. Yeah. I mean, it just kind of goes back to having, you know, solid morals, and, you know, and that's what makes the sport so great of fishing. And, you know, that was one of the biggest tournaments he's ever fished, and had to DQ himself from a 2-day event. That big money, and you know,
and I know
he was there all year grinding to get to that point, and had to DQ himself, unfortunately. So, but we see that a lot. I mean, it happens.
But mad respect.
Mad
respect.
I think you saw and going. I mean, I feel like the boat fishing community. I don't know how everybody would respond. I'd like to say everybody's a good person, but it seems like they're very different communities. The kayak fishing community, you seem like you get that across the board. I look at what happened with Drew Gregory last year, and winning the Angler of the Year, and there was a question about some of the waters that he fished, and somebody had challenged it, and he didn't come out and say, "Oh, that guy's wrong. I did everything right." He's like, hey, you have every right. Gave all the, the GoPro footage, everything to prove that he had to show that he was fishing where it was legal and everything was up and up. And they went through the review process and found that it was all truthful. But just the way he handled that with grace. And I know, knowing Cory personally, if he runs into a situation like that, you're going to see those folks handle it with grace. So just remember that everybody's watching as you come up through whatever it is you're doing, whether it's fishing or business or life, being a good person and having good, solid morals.
Yeah.
That just happened this weekend down there at Gunnersville with the Bassmaster Kayak Series. Christine Fisher, you guys may know who that is. I know who does. Christine, unfortunately, had to DQ herself after day one. She got the time wrong to, lines out. And so she ended up having to call Steve Owens and DQing herself from the weekend. So she fished for 30 minutes longer than what she was supposed to. And, it just goes back to being a good person and, doing the right thing. So it's unfortunate, but it happens. We all make mistakes and just own up to it and roll on to the next one.
Amen. I don't think I could say that any better.
When you're in the kayak world, you have a lot of autonomy. I mean, you're alone, unafraid out there. The eyes aren't nearly as much on you as they are like a lot of these boaters. And, that's where bringing a lot of humility to the sport and being able to take accountability for your stuff, to me, that paints a very positive message for the outdoor industry versus people that go on the defense. Everyone's going to question a winner, especially somebody who's on a hot streak, right? They're going to be like, what is that person doing? It's not mathematically possible. Hell, I even do it too.
Yeah.
It's not mathematically possible for you to win everything. You must be cheating. But then it's on the other person to say, hey, listen, I'll take a poly. You can follow me around all day. The reality is I catch mo fish.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's right. You ride that momentum, man. I mean, these guys get on a hot streak. I've been there, and
it's a thing. Momentum is a thing.
Yep.
You roll with it. It's all confidence. It's just having that positive mental attitude and going into the next one like I'm going to do well. Just having but it happens. You drop off and you stop catching them for a few tournaments.
Yeah.
Yep. One of the questions we get all the time, and Ben sort of just brought it up. He was talking about his experience in a kayak is, I want to get into kayak fishing, right? And I don't have any idea anything about kayaks, about the differences. Why at a Hobie at $4,000 is better than a $50 Sun Dolphin at Walmart when they're both made out of plastic and float. So maybe kind of go through. I know you did sales across different companies, obviously with Hobie now. What is it that you want to look for? Obviously everybody has a different budget, but what is it to look for when trying to select a kayak for fishing?
Cory, before you answer that, I got a question first. And that is, so why should I get into kayak fishing? Because you mentioned you were a boater and you boat fishing, but you obviously you love the kayak fishing. You're very good at it. Why should I pick up kayak fishing instead of hopping on my boat all the time?
So ease of use. So you can throw it in the bed of your truck, top of your car, whatever vehicle you have, right? You can I trailer my boats because of how much they weigh and I have them fully rigged out like a boat. But it's more intimate with, being out on the water, more intimate with a fish, I would say. It's kind of up close and personal. It's just more fun. You hook a big bass, any kind of fish, it's going to drag you around. And the other big thing for me is actually kayak fishing makes you a better angler, a better boat angler. And the reason being is because you don't have the ability to crank up the big motor and go run miles down the lake, to each spot and just go to those high percentage areas. You end up doing more homework online, if you Google Earth, Navionics, studying charts, and you break down water more, right? So you choose your areas and you break that. We all know there's fish in a lot of the water, okay? We know there's some water that's just dead, but there's fish there to be caught. It's just finding them and finding out what they're going to bite. But you can break down, like I'm guilty now of launching the power boat and going out and just dropping the trolling motor and just sticking a smaller area just because, and I end up catching fish and doing pretty well. You don't have to run around. I mean, sure, it's fun, but it does make you a better angler.
That makes a lot of sense. It probably forces you to slow down.
It does.
One thing I have noticed watching a lot of the pro anglers, even with the boater on the boating side, is how slow they fish sometimes with their bait in the water. Like they're flipping and pitching to cover or something, right? But how long they actually let it sit there and soak, even though they can run around the lake. Like, I think probably most people fish way too fast in that regard, and I'm certainly guilty of that. Kayak fishing, you have to slow down because like there's only so much cover you could probably fish in the area that you can reasonably get to during your fishing day.
That kind of boils down to what kayak you have as well. So you have paddling kayaks, you have pedal kayaks, pedal drives, and then you have electric motors on kayaks. So anywhere from bow mount with spot lock to torpedo, that's what I run on mine. So it's a stern mounted motor. It's a, over 100 pounds of thrust equal to a 3 horsepower motor. So I'm a power fisherman, even with plastics. Like I like to flip in places and constantly move. So I can cover a lot of water, but it's still not as much as what you could cover in a power boat. But it does force you to slow down in certain areas and really pick structure apart. You're not going to come in, cast 2 or 3 times, and then jump on the big motor and run to the next area. So it really just makes you a better angler. But it's more kayak fishing. You can get into those areas that you can't with boats. There is some boats that you can get extremely shallow, but you got low bridges, you've got culverts you can go through and get into those waters that are untouched, rivers, creeks. You can go around laydowns in a river. It's just totally different, man. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, going back to Pete's original question, then you talk about paddle driven and pedal driven and now electric motor driven. Go back to Pete's original question, if you wouldn't mind, and talk about that selection process and what that looks like for somebody getting into it.
Absolutely. So, it's all going to boil down to budget, right? So everybody has a different budget on what you want to get started with. We're talking fishing here. So you can start out in any kayak and be okay, right? But I always tell everybody to buy the best kayak that your wallet's going to allow you to, because that's features, durability, comfort, things of those natures, the layout of the boat. You can go really basic or you can go really advanced. So it really just boils down to what your budget is, how you're going to haul it. That's a lot of things that people overlook sometimes because not everybody drives a truck or has the ability to get a trailer. They may drive a car or an SUV and need to rooftop it. So, that kind of eliminates some kayaks right out of the gate, the bigger, heavier kayaks. So you're going to look for something, in that 50 to 65, 70 pound range that's more maneuverable, and then storage at home. Not everybody has a garage or a place that, you may live in an apartment and you don't have a place that you can put a 14-foot kayak. So you're stuck with a 10, 12-footer. So there's a lot of variables there, but the best advice I can give to somebody that's looking to get into kayak fishing or a kayak in general is try before you buy. There's so many different kayaks out on the market. Go to a specialty shop, outside of the big box stores, because they actually offer demos on demand. They do demo weekends. They may do a really big demo with all the reps, once or twice a year. It just depends. But get your butt in a boat and try different models because everybody's different sizes. You may be big, you may be tall, short, whatever. That boat is going to perform differently for everybody. So the boat that's perfect for me or you would be totally different for Ben or Trey. Yeah. It just depends. So get on the water and actually try something before you spend your hard-earned money on it, honestly.
So break it down for us. What is the perfect boat for you? And kind of go into some of the factors why you chose that. So for those of us looking to get a kayak, we kind of have a what am I looking for? Not baseline. A bullet point, a baseline. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Trey. A baseline to judge against.
So for myself, I want a pedal drive and a boat that has the ability to mount a motor on. So I am currently using the Pro Angler 14, the 180. So it has a reverse drive. I just picked up a 360, but I haven't had it on the water yet. And the 360 is you can move your boat left to right. The drive turns and it's pretty technical.
Wait a minute. The kayak would just go left?
Yeah.
And then just go right?
So
Chelsea, kind of like spider crawl?
Pivots. Yeah, so the bottom of the drive pivots. So on Hobie, it's a fin-driven system, right? So you have a handle on the left side of your kayak, and as you twist that, it turns. It's belt-driven in a gear, turns the bottom of your drive, right? So as you pedal, you're now being propelled left or right, forward, back. it's really neat.
That's pretty cool.
It's
There's
really
a couple
cool.
videos if you get on YouTube
Yeah.
and check it out. Look up the Pro Angler. They make it in the 12 and the 14, but the 360, like you can maneuver around docks and you can maneuver around trees and structure and stuff like that. So it came out a couple years ago, but it's sweet.
Yeah, the
But
very
perfect kayak
limited
for me-
the very limited kayak experience I have, not to cut you off, Corey, is
Yeah, no
I
worries.
went inshore with Chelsea, who has a Pro Angler 14, and I got a loaner of another brand, which just had forward and then hope for the best if you got to go backward. And we were fishing around some docks like flounder fishing and stuff. And she would like slide in there, crank that drive, and then turn her kayak and just set wherever she wanted for the cast. And then as tide was coming in or out, she could turn that drive to face it, and she could essentially spot lock by just moving a foot. And she could just sit right where she wanted to be and fish this dock. It was incredible.
How can we put that in my boat?
Yeah, right. But sorry, so you're looking to pedal drive. Back to what you're talking.
So pedal drive. I definitely want a pedal drive. The ability to have a motor. I prefer a stern-mounted motor over a bow mount. I like to have the bow of my boat sitting down in a kayak, even standing up in it. You're lower to the water, so that stuff is kind of in your face. They do make some bow mount trolling motors that have a little bit shorter shaft on it now, so that it doesn't stick up as high. But I prefer that motor on the back. Speed, I'm getting 6.5 out of my boat, which doesn't seem like a lot, but in a kayak, that's rolling pretty good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things out there. So that length of the boat, I prefer a longer kayak. It handles better in rougher water, more storage, and it also tracks straighter. So the longer the kayak, the better it's going to track from point A to point B, right? You go to a 10, 12-foot boat, some boats are going to walk the dog. As you paddle, whatever, you're going to have to correct more to keep that boat on a straight line.
So your kayak is chine walking.
Yeah.
Right.
Just like some boat brands I know.
6.5 miles an hour, you chine walk.
So, I mean, besides budget, and you broke that down,
Yep.
and it's no different than buying anything, right? It's no different than buying a boat, right? You can either fit a 14-foot John boat in your garage, or you can fit a 21-foot glass boat in your garage, right? So budget aside, I'm almost wondering, besides budget, why would anyone want to go with a paddle style kayak? What are the advantages of having a paddle style versus a pedal style and stuff like that?
Shallow water. Some of the drives are not going to work. Your prop driven drives, pedal drives, your motors are not going to work in extremely shallow water, right?
Okay.
Hobie with the fins, you can actually flutter them so the fins actually sit like kind of up under the boat, and you can barely pedal, and it's going to give you enough propulsion to get shallow. But there again, you run into issues if you have obstacles. You can't straighten out the fins to pull it out of the drive, so you can get stuck.
Okay.
But having a paddling kayak, you can get in shallower water.
So if you're going creek fishing, like really shallow, then paddle kayak. If that's your primary
There you go.
way you enjoy fishing, then it sounds
depends
like
on
that's
the
probably
body
good.
of water you're going to. I fish tournaments that are on rivers and stuff like that, and we prefer paddling over pedaling or motors.
So folks,
like on the Susquehanna.
so for the folks listening, your terrain is going to dictate the model of kayak that you get, right? So those guys and gals fishing like low creeks with rock on the bottom, like you ain't going to have no fin on the bottom or it'll break off, right?
That's right. Right.
Yeah, he brought up a really good point with the Susquehanna. I know when they do the tournaments up there, most of the folks, are going to a paddle and more kind of like a drift fishing type deal. So if that, locally we look at some of the rivers that you see folks fish like the Haw and stuff, they get their kayaks on there, a lot of low rocky areas than the paddle. And you said something that kind of caught my eye, you want a pedal kayak with the ability to mount a motor. Is there, obviously you can with the PA-14 since that's what you chose with Hobie, but what is it that, will they be labeled as like motor ready, or what should you look for if that's something you're considering?
So some kayaks are going to have different mounting plates that mount on the stern. And then also if it's a pedal driven kayak, you have to have a rudder to operate that boat, right? So some of them are up under the kayak, so under the hull. Some are stern mounted so that they flip down. So some of the stern mounted motors don't work well. There's adapter plates. Like everybody's come out with a lot of different aftermarket plates and things to kind of adapt things. And then you have boats that are specifically built around having power poles mounted on the back, power pole micro. as well as the same footprint for a Torpedo Newport motor. So there's boats that are actually built around that have inserts already molded into the boat. So it's easy 4-bolt pattern, bolted up, and you're ready to go. And then you have to hook up foot braces if you want foot controlled steering, versus hand controlled. I mean, there's a lot to it. You can get super technical, or you can go, bare bones basic with a motor on it. So
you can do foot control steering with a motor. That's kind of cool.
So that's what I run on my boat. So you have foot slide brackets that are up in front of you, right, with foot braces on them. And so they have cables that run back to a steering triangle that's on that Torpedo. So it's essentially hands-free. Outside of working my throttle for the motor, I'm able to turn that motor on, say 20 watts of power, right? Which is, half a mile an hour, and work down a shoreline. And I can sit there and I can adjust my boat with my foot braces. So I'm constantly casting. I'm not having to reach down and, grab my rudder handle or handle to steer my motor.
Yeah, I was going to say one of these days I'm probably going to have just a little joystick.
Yeah,
but then I guess the issue is the casting. But could you imagine a little joystick and then a button for spot lock? That'd be fun. That'd be fun to.
Yeah, I mean that goes back to having your bow mount trolling motors. I mean it's the same motors. Motor Guide makes the XI3 kayak motor, and so you have a key fob hanging around your neck. So I automatically feel like I'm at a disadvantage because I'm having to stop reeling and have that bait in the water because I'm having to adjust my motor, right? Yeah. Or put it on spot lock, or choose a path that I want it to go down. Like you're constantly messing with that, so you're not reeling, you're not fishing, and I feel like I like to capitalize on having my line in the water, more often than not. So that's another reason I choose a stern mounted motor. But back to getting to like choosing a kayak is look at the layout of the kayak, comfort and stability. Every boat is different with the seats. Most of them are lawn chair style seats now, that are super comfortable. They're dry. You get air under your butt, if you do sit the whole day. So you're not sitting in water, and you're getting that breathability, comfort. And then the layout of the boat, that's huge for kayak anglers. You want a place because you're confined to a smaller place and space than in a power boat, right? So you want a place that you can put all of your gear. You need a good place for your graph if you're going to run a fish finder. You need places to put your rods if you're not going to use just a crate behind you. Where you're going to keep all your extra tackle bags, batteries. Like you get down to I'm running a 10-inch Garmin with live scope, and I'm running 2 lithium batteries, one for the unit and one for the live scope. I mean, you've got your batteries for your motor. I've got my buddy Casey Reed. He runs live Hummingbird. He has 360 on one of the other units. I mean, it's the same thing as having it on a bass boat. I mean, it's common now to see the more advanced anglers and tournament guys to have $15,000-$20,000 wrapped up in a kayak.
Yeah, we actually have Casey coming on next weekend to talk about angling, and one of the things I want to talk about is his setup, because he has it all on there, man.
Was it a diecast? So they had what was it, $20,000 kayak or $15,000? What was it?
It was
dugout. The dugout had that for Hobie. So that's your pro angler 14 360 with a Torpedo motor, live scope, 2 graphs. You got your lithium batteries. Like it adds up pretty quick. We all know this from fishing, but it's pretty common now for these shops that are selling Hobie or the higher end brands to do custom rigging and hit that $15,000 to $20,000 mark. It's becoming more advanced.
So for the average person out there that's looking to get a kayak like that, for boats, obviously they offer financing. Do they offer financing on major kayaks like that?
They do. Yeah. Some companies, actually Hobie is actually looking into a program now. It hasn't been released to the public yet, but we're looking at a program to finance through a financial company through Hobie. Mm-hmm. So you can come in because it is a big purchase. But some shops already, they offer financing through like Synchrony or a firm and places like that. Because these aren't purchases of, when you get into the more hardcore fishing, it's not just going to buy a $600, $700 kayak.
Right.
You're into the thousands of dollars. And we actually tried that with a company I worked at before, and we were more wreck. We had fishing boats, but we were more wreck orientated. And I feel like it didn't work out well for us as a company with that financing, because people are not financing a $5,000 to $1,000 kayak in most senses.
Yeah.
Most instances. So when you get up into those 3 to 5, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 kayak purchases, people are going to have to start financing.
Are they also insuring these significantly expensive kayaks?
Yeah. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know this, and this is a really good rule of thumb for anybody that's listening to this podcast that wants to get into kayak fishing or fishing in general. Talk to your insurance company. So I have insurance through a friend of mine locally here, and I have all of my kayaks and fishing gear insured. So if it did get destroyed, got stolen, whatever, they're going to replace it with a deductible. A lot of people don't know that, and they don't think about it because it is a less expensive item, I'd say, compared to like a power boat. But yeah,
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, we all have insurance on our power boats, but I would imagine the risk is much higher of getting swamped or something happened on the water where you're losing a lot of maybe your gear and stuff, your electronics, etc. That you might come into play. So for those listening in kayak fishing, looking to get insurance, that's a great point.
I'll also say this. I got my truck broken into up at Lake Norman. They busted my window out and stole all my fishing tackle. This was back in, I think, 2017 or something. And they didn't touch my boat, but my homeowner's insurance covered all my fishing tackle. Right. So it's just important for those, like, you're investing a significant amount of money in mostly expendable items, right? And some of them being durable, like $20,000 kayaks. You need to pay attention to that insurance and make sure that you have all your bells and whistles, so that when something happens, which most likely it does, you're covered and you're not out, 15, 20 grand.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't know that you can even insure a kayak.
You can insure a dog.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can insure a kayak.
You can insure your leg.
You
too.
can insure your hair.
Yeah.
I don't want none, but
the pro athletes do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's important information, and appreciate you breaking that down. There was something I wanted to ask about. You talked about being a better angler because of kayak fishing, and I don't want to get too much off the topic of the kayaks themselves, but are there limitations to certain techniques that you can't do? Can you not do certain things in a kayak that you can do in a boat?
Not really.
The one technique I guess because you can stand up in the kayaks, right? So there you go. That kind of eliminates it.
It's all dependent on the kayak there again, and choosing the right kayak. So that kind of goes back to a person that wants to get in the kayak angling. Like if you're coming from a boat and want to get into a kayak, think about the techniques that you want to use, like flipping and pitching and stuff like that. Like you want to be able to stand up. Some of these boats you can stand up on the seat or on the bow. Like Christine Fisher's kind of famous now. I mean, she stands on the front of her pro angler. They're extremely stable. But yeah, there's really no technique that I can think of offhand that I can't do that I can do in my power boat. The big thing is leverage, and then the angles. You are lower to the water even standing up, so it does prove to be a challenge sometimes with flipping. You have an advantage of skipping around docks because you're lower, like out of a kayak. So I mean, there's a lot of give and take there, and I mean we could really get into the nuts and bolts of kayak angling and the advantages and disadvantages, but
that's good for the beginners though. Like if you love to skip docks, or if you like to throw a frog, or if you like to, whatever technique is going to require you to use a specific rod, it be at a certain elevation, you need to understand the kayak you're buying, because like it would probably be challenging, is it not, to rip a jerkbait if you have the wrong rod, or pop a frog if you have the wrong rod at the wrong elevation. Things like that are a factor. Yeah.
I mean, if you can't stand up and you're trying to work a jerk bait, and you're trying to flip and in a sitting position, like it doesn't work all the time, and you have to have different length rods, and there's a lot of factors there.
Okay.
I think it's interesting while we're talking about like techniques and stuff, but when Chelsea, my wife, purchased her kayak, we reached out and like, hey, we're getting into this. any suggestions. And he was like, take it out of the water and flip it and reset the boat and get back into it, because it's not an if, but a when, and you got to make sure that you're able to get back into your boat. So can you talk just briefly on that, kind of why that's so important?
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, it's going to happen at some point. You know, you're going to put your head over the side. I mean, that's one thing. You go to lip a big bass or whatever, get your head over the side of the kayak, and your boat flips over.
So how many times have you fallen out of the kayak?
Twice.
So
were they good stories, or were they just like, oh, I'm being dumb?
One, I got my head over the side of the kayak and just rolled my kayak. Actually, I kind of threw my hands up and just fell in the water because I didn't want my boat to flip over.
Yeah.
So it kind of dumped me out. The other time I was hung up in a tree, standing in my boat. There was current and wind current reaching up, and just kind of the boat went out from underneath me, and I kind of fell in the drink. But I don't have any crazy stories. I mean, we all hear some wild stuff, but.
So here's a message for the audience. 2 things. 1, wear your personal flotation device, your PFD. And if you don't, you better learn how to swim before you buy a kayak, right?
Even wear your PFD. I can tell you that. Guys that are the best swimmers in the world, you still struggle. Water's cold. Like, you've got current. You're not always right there on the shore. I mean, with kayak angling, I fish offshore. I fish on Erie. I've been on St. Clair and 5-foot, rollers and power boats going around. I mean, these boats are able to take it, but you have to be minded in the safety aspect that things can go wrong. But like Pete was talking about, the best thing, for someone that's getting into kayak angling, when you buy a kayak, take it out without any of your gear and flip, or even some gear, flip your kayak over in water that you can't stand on the bottom, and learn to re-entry, because it can happen. And the worst thing that can, happen to you is you not being offshore and not being able to get back in your kayak. You can get hypothermic, drown. I mean, it's a thing that people overlook, but a lot of the kayak safety classes that are out there, that's going to be the advice they're going to give you, is to learn to re-entry. It happens. A good friend of mine at Guntersville this weekend was practicing, and you guys may know, I mean, there was a huge storm that blew through there, 50 to 80 mile an hour winds.
Yeah.
And Joe McElroy got a phone call, and his buddy said, hey man, you need to get off the water. Well, he tried to get back to the ramp, couldn't, and got blown up under a little bridge, and it had a spillway, flipped his boat. He was in the water for 45 minutes, tried to call 911 multiple times, and they couldn't hear him. And he was getting hypothermic. Finally, the call went through. He was able to hear the operator tell him where he was at, and he was actually rescued. And he's an older gentleman, former Green Beret. I mean, he's a pretty fit guy, and it's just freak accidents happen. You don't know when or where it's going to happen.
So you talked about that incident at Guntersville with the inclement weather, and we talk about jumping in a kayak, flipping it over, like making sure you can get back into it. Your buddy that you talked about was a former Green Beret, which, hopefully he's still physically fit or is he still a Green Beret or not?
No, he's not.
Well,
I guess
forever
always
a Green Beret,
but he's an older gentleman. He's in his 60s.
Forever a Green Beret. Absolutely. Talk about physical fitness and like endurance and stuff. How much do the kayak anglers specifically, how much do they focus on that stuff as being a part of the factor and being able to fish, competitively or recreationally? Probably competitively.
The more hardcore competitive anglers tend to take care of themselves a little bit better. Some do. The guys that are at the top, you're going to see workout, have like a good workout regimen. I'm not one of those guys. I hate to run and I hate to lift anymore. Like, I hurt. But you've got guys that are out of shape as well. But yes, there is people that it's physically demanding, especially paddling and pedaling.
Yeah.
Without motors, I mean, to pedal a kayak for miles, I mean, yeah, you can stay in a small area and it's not too bad on your body. But when you're pedaling, I mean, it's going to work your quads, your core, your knees. Like, you need to take care of your body for sure. And it's physically taxing to fish on the water all day. I mean, when we were just down at the Harris Chain for the Hobie BOS, the wind blew all day Saturday, and I'm talking like 20, 30 mile an hour winds. No matter if you were in a creek, like the wind was swirling, you were getting blown around. So you were constantly in the Hobie BOS. You can't use electric motors. So you're pedaling the whole time or paddling. And so you're constantly trying to stay on your spot and get that correct angle for a cast and stay on that grass bed and stuff like that. So you're thinking 8-9 hours a day, you're sitting there and your legs are constantly moving. Like it's not, you don't get to relax really unless you just want to drift on. So, it's physically demanding for sure.
Now I'm thinking about it. You put your kayak into the wind and you can constantly pedal at the right speed and you can almost spot lock yourself, I would imagine.
Yep.
But that's going to be taxing.
Hook the electrodes up and measure the cardiovascular endurance of somebody doing kayak angling versus somebody who's playing in a football game, right? You're going to see a huge difference. And that's where a lot of people are like, oh, fishing's not a sport. And I say, look at the physical demands from somebody who stands on a boat, makes 1,000 casts during the day, burns a significant amount of calories. I'm not saying like the physical part just makes it a sport, but it absolutely has a competitive edge, and physical endurance is one of those factors that makes this absolutely a sport, in my opinion.
I feel like I got hit by a truck from fishing in that wind all day yesterday.
I'm dead tired right now.
I mean, your body feels it. I mean, I have to take a couple days to recover after a long weekend, like a 2-day tournament. Because I mean, it's up early to bed late. You know, it's 1,000, 2,000 casts a day. You're constantly pedaling, like you're moving. You're more in the elements in a kayak than you are even in a boat, because that boat is constantly rocking, or the kayak is. So your body's compensating for that. So you're using like your core constant, like your muscles hurt.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of things that you kind of overlook, but you know, it's demanding for sure.
I want to talk a little bit about kayak angling with you, because you've obviously been successful. You started a big tour, but before we go into that, can, you know, as a Hobie rep, Hobie sales, you obviously know the product. Can you kind of just real quick give us an introduction into their fishing line, and maybe like an entry level, lower price point, mid level, and then obviously we know kind of the coupe de gras, that top of the line is that Hobie PA14. But for those folks not looking to spend, you know, what at $5,000, whatever they are now on that, like what would you recommend for somebody looking for that kind of entry level, just want to get started but want something stable and that's going to fish well?
Yeah, if you wanted to stick with the Hobie brand, you have the Passport 10.5, the Passport 12, and the Compass. So you're looking around that $2,000 to $3,000 mark, and then it goes up from there. You have the Outback, and then you have the Pro Anglers, and then you have the Pro Angler 360 series. So you're looking around $2,000 to close to $6,000 when you're in a 360. So okay, there's definitely entry level. And then outside of Hobie, because there's everybody makes great kayaks out there. I just choose to fish out of a Hobie, and then I work for them as well. So I'm a little biased there, but Wilderness Systems has the Recon that you can add a pedal drive to. They have the HD and the non-HD model. They have the Radar. You've got the Tarpon, which is a paddling kayak. And then you go over to Native and Bonafide. You've got pedal drives. You got paddling boats that are rigged for motors. So there's a lot of, you can get into a really good fishing kayak for around $1,200 to $2,500. You can go a little less expensive, but if you want a pedal drive boat, that's where you're going to be.
Yeah.
And how, for anybody considering it, you know, they might go out and do it and they're not sure after a year or two, do the kayaks hold their value fairly well, resale value wise, or does that tend to fall off?
They do, depending on the model, and your Hobies hold their value pretty well. Native, Bonafide. It really depends on the model. You're going to see a better resale value on Hobie Pro Anglers than anything else.
Okay.
But there's always people. My first Hobie actually was a PA12 that I bought from a guy that was active duty down at Bragg. And I got a fish finder, a PFD. He was getting ready to be deployed. He used it like 3 times, wanted to get rid of it, and I got a steal on it. I mean, it came with a cart, the fish finder, the battery, the PFD, paddle, net, like he had everything. And so that was my first Hobie. But yeah, I mean, check Facebook Marketplace and, you know, things like that, and you can come across some really good deals. And that's the other thing is, like, if you're not sure about being in a kayak or being a kayak angler and you just want to try it out, go buy a used boat. There's plenty of used boats out there, especially after we had the pandemic. We sold tens of thousands of kayaks during that time. Because
Got them stimulus checks, baby.
That's right. Yeah.
Hey, seriously, I said, man, I should be a repo man. I should be a repo man on how many people ain't gonna be able to make these payments. But yeah, keep going, man.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, so I mean, there was a lot of boats sold. I mean, the media is telling everybody to social distance and get outside, so it was good for the outdoor industry. I mean, powerboat sales were through the roof, RVs, like everything. And so a lot of people got into the sport and they used it a few times, and they're like, it wasn't for me. So they're sitting on the side of the house in the garage, and their wife, whoever, is telling them to get rid of it. So you can find a lot of good deals.
Yeah.
And then some of the shops that are around, the independent specialty shops, they have used boats, and they do programs where lay away, and they do all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of options for people out there.
Yeah, we keep going back to that independent specialty shop kind of deal, and for anybody out there looking, I think that if you're serious about a kayak and wanting to get into one, even if you're going to buy used, those seem to be the places to go. Your big box stores, you can go look at them, that's great, but check out the local kayak shops. There seems like there's one in every town now. With how the sport's taken off, not just fishing, but recreational. And like Cory was saying, they'll set up on-demand tests. They might have test days. I know Rock Outdoors, this sells a bunch of different brands. They do 1 or 2 a month where they go on Saturday and they take a bunch of kayaks to the water, and they invite everybody out to come try them. So take advantage of those situations and try before you buy. Even if you're going to buy used, like Cory said, and recommended, you can still go try a new one. And then you at least know what you're looking for as you go search the market for that purchase. You
both bring up a good point, and I think nobody's steering anyone away from a big box store. But let's be honest, when you go to Lowe's and you talk to somebody in the lumber section, they probably don't know the first thing about a 2x4x12 or whatever, right? Hell, I don't even know what it is. But I'll tell you that the specialty stores, they are anglers. They do use the product. They know it, right? So I bought my boat from Bass Pro Shops, right? But that's just because of budget, right? That was a budget thing. But go to those specialty stores. They're going to be knowledgeable on the product.
They're the enthusiasts, like you said. They're the ones that use it day in and day out and know how to operate. And it's a specialty product. I mean, when you get down to it, so.
Yeah. Before we move on, I know we want to talk tournament fishing stuff from the kayak side. For the listeners, do you have to register a certain length kayak as a vessel in whatever state you're in?
You don't. Well, not here in North Carolina. The only time that you have to in North Carolina register is if you put a electric motor or gas motor on a kayak.
So they do have to be registered with a trolling motor?
Yep.
Ooh.
It's 14-footer ever though, correct?
It's under. It doesn't matter what size.
Okay, so in North Carolina, doesn't matter.
Yeah, if you motorize it in any capacity, you have to have it registered, which it's pretty inexpensive. I mean, people, some guys are like, oh, it's expensive thing every year. It's like $30. I mean, you get down to it, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's like 2-pack of soft plastics.
Yeah,
that's right.
No, that's important for everyone to know. I had no idea, and so if you're getting ready to put a motor on your stuff, make sure you go to was it Fish and Wildlife, and you got to register that vessel, right?
Yeah, for North Carolina.
Yeah. What about your kayak trailer?
Yeah, what about your trailer? Do you got to get tags?
Kayak trailers, same way. Yeah, I mean, it's like people convert utility trailers or specialized kayak trailers, custom built ones. Like I have a custom built one, but yeah, you have to register that as well.
Okay.
But there's certain states, and I want to say it's Ohio, that you have to register a kayak no matter what, even if it's on the water, you got to have it registered.
That makes sense.
So in Missouri,
Ohio would do that.
Yeah. In Missouri, so this is true for boats. I don't know about kayaks, but in Missouri, you have to register your trailer, your actual boat, the hull, and the motor.
You have to register the motor?
Yes.
Pennsylvania, you have to title a motor, but you have to register.
It's a tax thing, so they can nickel and dime you again. But two, I guess theoretically you can sell the motor off the boat, and it can go someplace else.
Well, we need to have a conversation with Rick Clun because that's absolutely ridiculous. So
I don't think he has any influence over Jeff City.
So
he's Ben's go. He has the influence.
So before we talk a little bit of the actual kayak tournament angling with Cory, any questions about kayaks left for you guys?
Oh, color. So how much does the color factor Like, how much does color factor in your decision-making process? Like, I know you'll see guys up on the front deck of their boat and they'll be wearing like multicam because they think the fish can't see them, right? When they're bed fishing, you get some guys that, you know, like take their shirt off because they're wearing a white one and put like a dark colored shirt on. I don't get it, but does color factor into the decision?
For some people, yes. For me, no.
Okay.
You're so low to the water, like it's not really going to matter. I mean, if you were fishing in a spring that was crystal clear where, you know, you're trying to catch a fish down in Florida off of a bed, yeah, a bright yellow kayak or orange or whatever, like may stick out. But in the majority of waters, like that color is going to kind of disappear in the light spectrum anyways. It's more of a color kind of falls into the safety aspect of most folks. They want a brighter color. But for fishing, it's more of a myth, in my opinion, that it's going to spook fish. I mean, you'd have to be on top of fish. And I mean, I've caught them right at the boat. Like I don't think it really matters too much.
Do people that use yellow kayaks typically not catch fish because they look like bananas?
Like, no.
So just on the safety thing real quick, this is more of a PSA than anything. Flag, lights. If you're kayak fishing, do it. I see it all the time out on the water where they don't have anything. And, you know, I'm running 55, 60 miles an hour in a boat and I come around a bend and there's a kayak with no flags or anything. It's hard to see that person on the water.
It is.
So be smart. They sell a bunch of different flag kits. They don't cost anything. I mean, they're like $15. You can get a fold up flag with a yellow flag that hangs up in the air so they can at least see you when you come around the bend.
I mean, you can go to Lowe's and get a little flag over in like the mailbox section where they have the signage and stuff. That's, you know, a couple dollars that you could put on a crate or whatever you want to see.
If you want to get real cheap, just take the flags I have at Lowe's for the lumber.
Yeah, I mean,
You know, they give them out for free, right?
Yeah. What I'm getting at is do something.
Buy lumber, though.
It is a huge thing, though, Pete. Like I've been close to being run over a few times, and you know, it's more of like bends in the creeks and stuff that where it's coming around 60. And I've been guilty. I've almost run over kayaks in my boat. It's hard to see you. And then the other thing too, back to like registering your kayak with a motor, is you are required to run, you know, in low light conditions. You have to have bow and stern lights. Okay. So you have to have that white light and then a green and red light on your boat. So it is required by law, and they do check you and will write you a ticket if you don't. So.
Yeah, and I can tell you somebody who's rigged a bunch of different boats, and I've only had the pleasure of rigging one kayak, which is my wife's. It is nothing to rig a dang kayak to throw lights and stuff on there. So it is so much easier to work. It is. I had a lot of fun when we rigged some stuff on hers, and it's not a hard thing. And I know there's some companies too out there that have like snap-on magnetics, so you don't even have to drill holes in your boat or whatever if that's what you're worried about. So at the end of the day, just do something so that you can be seen when you're on the water. Because actually the first time Cory and I had talked a bunch, the first time I met him was at Falls. I had a club tournament and you were there to fish a kayak tournament. And right at Blastoff, you know, we're coming out of Upper Barton's there to go out to the lake, and all the kayaks that were heading that way were kind of lined up, spaced out a little bit, but they're through the lake. Luckily, they all had lights or something, but that was when it really clicked for me. Like, if you're out there and don't have anything and you're fishing a tournament or whatever in the morning, you're definitely not going to get seen at Blastoff by a boat tournament. You know, most tournaments, as soon as it's safe, you know, local clubs and stuff, we're ready to roll. We're not waiting until like the sun's up, like BSS waits a little longer and stuff like that. We're rolling as soon as, hey, y'all feel comfortable? Yeah, looks good, Bill. Let's run them. Then, you know, and you're down the water. So.
Not brag bass busters. They ought to start late because those guys show up late.
Dude, I mean, no kidding. Yesterday, I almost got blasted by a boat that was probably 25 feet behind me, and I slowed down for a danger area on Falls. But that goes, and this is stimulating a lot more questions about the safety stuff with kayak fishing. What's the bare? So especially you said you have to register your vessel when you have a motor on it from the kayak side. Is there a bare minimum safety standard by law for that? Like, you know, like with a boat, you have to have a throw pillow and you have to have, you know, a fire extinguisher and stuff like that. For kayaks with motors on them, is there a standard?
So kayaks with motors, yeah, you have to have the white light. You have to have your bow lights, green and red. And that's really it. You don't have to have a fire extinguisher or anything like that.
What about a whistle?
You do have to have a whistle.
I know that because of my lake, you have to have a whistle, and I think a life jacket, and
The PFD has
They
to
will
be
write your ticket.
accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to have a whistle and have to have a PFD that is accessible. And if it's inflatable, you have to have it worn. Like,
Okay.
You have to wear it. So that means like if you have a PFD and you put it inside of a hatch of the kayak, you can get a ticket for that because it is not accessible. If you flip your kayak and you get separated, like you're not ever going to get that PFD. It's not going to float, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, whistle and PFD is the bare minimum for any kayak. And then with a motorized kayak, you got to have the lights.
And keep in mind, all these will vary probably upon state. So check your state and local regulations to make sure you're squared away before you get on the water and be safe.
And I will say to comment on the inflatable must be worn. I got checked by NCWRC and only had 2 inflatables, and we were fishing and they were laying on the seats because you take them off when you fish on the boat, and they said, "Well, you don't have any life jackets." I said, "I got 2 life jackets." No.
Is that
If
on
they're
a
not
boat? On a
on,
boat?
if they're not on, they do not count North Carolina as a
Wow.
life jacket. They said go to Walmart and buy some of those cheap orange ones and shove them in a cupboard, and you're fine. They just gave me a warning, but yeah, they do not count even if they're laying right there on the seat.
I've been breaking the law
Oh yeah.
every day. So, we talked about bare minimum. Is there anything that you do personally based on lessons learned or scar tissue? Is there anything additional that you carry with you for safety precautions, like a personal locator beacon or anything like that?
I don't. The one thing that I do use is a flag, typically. I keep a flag on there, like Pete said. Yak Attack makes the Visi Carbon Pro, which is a light and has a flag. It's actually the bag that everything folds into. So it's got 2 bungees on it and just clips on. That's one thing that I typically carry with me at all times and have on the boat throughout the day. But EPIRB and things like that, like there is some guys that have them. And now that they're not as expensive as they used to be, we tend to spend $500 on a fishing reel, but we look at safety things as like, we don't need it. It's too expensive.
I mean, dude,
but it is a good thing to have.
You're up on the Great Lakes in the middle of essentially the freshwater ocean. There's Coast Guard stations all throughout the Great Lakes. And one of the things that I know that I would carry on me up there is some sort of beacon type deal or a radio that I don't know if they use UHF. I think it's UHF, right? That those guys are on. But that's important to know. So kind of like Ben said and Cory and all of us been saying, like, check your state regulations. Also check your federal regulations if you go into federal water, right? Because there is a difference. There's some sort of nautical mile, once you pass state waters. Yeah, the offshore fishing guys, like there's federal regulations. Even the creel limit on certain fish species changes in federal waters and stuff like that. Yep. So, and educate yourself, and then if you have any specific questions, you can hit us up on the OneCast page, and we'll try to get that answer for you.
There's lakes too. Any navigable waterway that is Coast Guard patrolled or responded to, you have to follow those. So that's a question that now stimulated. Kill switch? Do you have to have a kill switch like you do with a boat for your electric motor?
Yeah, so my Torpedo has a magnetic kill switch that sits on there, and I attach it to either my pants or my PFD.
Okay.
It's got a little. I mean, some guys don't wear it. I think it's probably, let's say if it's a law, but it should be, because if you do get knocked over, like if you're standing up and running your motor on low and you hit a stump, like it's happened to a few guys, get knocked out of the boat, like your boat's just going to continue on. So yeah, I do wear it though.
Yeah, I know navigable waters, the Coast Guard, that is a regulation now where you have to have a kill switch for a motor. I don't know if it specifies gas motor, but a motor propelling a vessel. Yeah. So that's what I was curious if they did.
I would imagine it's not electric because none of us have kill switches with our trolling motors.
I was thinking that.
That's a good point. Maybe we should edit that out. Don't give them any ideas.
Coast Guard, don't listen to us.
We'll have a big tether to our trolling motors now in case we fall out of the boat.
One has a kill switch on it.
That's right.
Yeah. So be safe, everyone out there. Be safe on the water. But let's transition over a little bit to talk kayak fishing tournaments. And Cory, if I don't know how many different formats there are, but if you kind of just want to break down how, and you've done both, kind of the major difference between kayak fishing and boat fishing, because I think we're probably all familiar with the boat fishing because it's always on TV and all. And those of us who are, addicted to fishing, we see all that. But kayak is still up and coming. So if you want to, and if there's multiple ways, just kind of give out maybe the couple most common kayak tournament rules and setups and how it's ran.
So really the most common and most used, I don't think there's really any live weigh-ins anymore for kayaks. It's all catch, photo, release. We call it CPR, so catch, photo, release. That's a big difference between boats of throwing them in a live well and coming in and actually weighing them. But CPR, so you're going to have a designated measuring board, okay, that everybody has to use. You can some of them specify, like Hobie and Bass, you have to have or actually just Hobie, you have to have a metal board. Some of them allow a poly board, plastic, or a metal. Certain brands, like you can only use a certain brand, like Catch Company has a board that's out there that's kind of the standard now. Yeah. So you have that. You use your cell phone. Like there's apps out there now, so it's a live leaderboard. You take a picture of the fish, and in the background or on the fish, whatever, you got to look at your rules because every tournament is different or series. But you have a unique identifier to that tournament, right? And it's going to have a number on it, or it's going to have a card that says CKA or KBF or Hobie or whatever. But you have to have that in the picture. And so you take a picture of your fish, and you're going to upload that picture to a live. It's either TourneyX or Fishing Chaos, or there's a couple other little things out there that people use. So that's kind of the basics there. And then your rules, going back to your rules, like some you have to have the mouth closed. You can't pinch the tail. You can't have your hand inside of a gill plate. Like you can't cover the eye because that's an identifying mark of the fish. Like there's certain fins that they don't want you to cover on. And there's all these rules are in place because of stuff that's happened in the past, like with cheating and things of that nature. So you want to be able to identify the difference between this 18-inch fish and if you catch one an hour later, make sure it's not the same fish, because every fish has kind of like a birthmark on it, so to speak. Like lateral lines could be different. The fin may have a little cut in it.
But what if you catch the same fish twice? For instance, bed fishing. You put him back and he goes right back. Are you allowed to catch him again?
No, not in the same day. So if it's a like a 2-day tournament, like KBF runs a trail 1 on Saturday and then trail 2 on Sunday. It's not a 2-day tournament, so it's separate days. So if you were to bed fish on Saturday, you could go back Sunday to the same place and go catch the same fish and use them. But if it is a 2-day tournament, you can't, like out of your 10 fish that you have to check in, you can't use the same fish at all.
What I guess you could get away with that when you're sight fishing, but what if you're not sight fishing, but you're just fishing? You know what I mean? Like
luck of the draw, man.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things, and it kind of goes back to angler responsibility. Like if I was to go catch a 20-inch fish, right? Yeah. And an hour later, I came back through that general area and I caught another 20-inch fish. Like I need to do my due diligence and look through my photo album and say, hey, is there any identifying marks? You could submit that fish and leave it up to the judges to see and let them deal with it and continue on fishing. They're going to let you know because they sit in the background and they're looking at these fish on a computer. So it's blown up. They can zoom in. They can see it a lot better than you can on your phone. But it does happen. I mean, there's been people that have lost, being in first or, in the money and got dropped out and then they'd go back and allow you to upload the next biggest fish that you had, to that or whatever.
Are the pictures, are they geotagged when they're uploaded in the background?
Yeah, so it's got location, time, like anything. That's the other thing too, is like phones now, they record everything. So if you were to take a picture and crop the photo, like and submit that, or change the direction, like you have your phone turned sideways, right? And in your album, that picture's turned this way and not the correct way for you to view it. If you were to change that, it actually flags that photo and says that it's been manipulated, no matter what you do to it. So if you were to change the location, the timestamp, anything in your phone, like it alerts the system.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things a lot of practices that are out there, like over the years, that have eliminated cheating in certain ways. So every couple of years, I'd say now it's about every 2 years, we come across something that somebody's come up with to try to cheat. I mean, it's just, we know that's going to happen at some point. But it doesn't happen very often anymore. I mean, I would say that most people, we talked about this in the beginning, most people are on the up and up.
Yeah.
You know, but there's been all kinds of things that have happened out there. So
you're gonna have bad eggs in anything, especially when there's money involved. And you
That's
told
right.
us about some of the stuff you saw. Like, I know you told Chelsea some of the stuff, and she kind of told me about the conversation you had, and it was kind of sad what people would do to you know, clipping fins and things like that to try to make it look like a different fish. And
right, people cut tails, fins, you know, modified measuring boards. Like, that's why Hobie only goes to metal boards now. Like, sure, you could weld a board back together, but they do a board check before the tournament starts, and they put a sticker on there so that they know that board's been checked. And if that sticker's not visible in your photos, like, those fish are DQ'd.
Mm-hmm.
So they check all this stuff beforehand. But the old plastic boards, like the hog troughs, back in the day, you know, not to get on anything negative, but I mean, it happens. We all know cheating happens in everything, especially when money is involved. But there was a guy that had 3 measuring boards, and he had a full size length. He had one with 2 inches cut out of it, and he took dowel rods because there was a little channels in the back of the board, right? So he took a dowel rod and glued them in, but he cut 2 inches of the board out that would be covered by the fish, right? So as you laid the bass down, that little split, so from 10 to 12 inches is now together, right? So you got 2 inches out of this one. The next board he had 4 inches cut out. So he catches a 14-inch fish. He takes a picture on the regular board, right? Uploads it. Takes his other board out, puts that 14-inch fish on there. Now it's 16 inches. Then he gets the next board that had 4 inches cut out. Now it's an 18-inch fish. And so, like, it's hard for people, like, when you see it, it's hard for judges to see that. But once it's, like, brought to light, you go, there's no way that's an 18-inch bass. That's a 14-inch fish. Like, you can tell by the body size and stuff.
Yeah.
Quickly going through and looking, like, it was things like that. So that's changed a lot of the rules, like some metal boards. And, you know, we used to use cameras prior to cell phones, and like you had an SD card. So at the end of the tournament, we had to put an SD card in a Ziploc bag and turn it in, and they'd plug it in the computer and have to go through all your fish. Like, things have evolved so much, and different practices. Like, it's extremely hard for somebody to cheat and not get caught.
It went from floppy disk to iPhones.
yeah,
That's right. That's right. So, you know, the other thing is too, is I mentioned this, like, there's people that win, you have eyes on you all the time. With TourneyX and Fishing Chaos, for every tournament, you can go back and you can look at every fish submission that was on there for that angler. So their top 5 fish, people scrutinize those, I mean, with a fine-tooth comb. They're going to go through and they're going to look at every little detail. And if a judge missed something, they're going to go back and they're going to say something.
Oh,
They're either gonna
absolutely.
story.
Someone didn't make any money. Yes. People are going to hold people accountable.
You know, and I can't blame people for going back, you know, because people make mistakes. But yes, there's people that just trolls, I call them. You know, they're just going to troll, and they'll dig something up that's 6 months old, and they go, "Oh, well, this guy won $5,000 and shouldn't have won anything." I mean, it happens. Like, things slip through the cracks, and whether intentional or not, most of the time I'd say it's not intentional. It's just an error. Caught the same fish, and you know, stuff like that. So,
no, yeah, it'd be hard to tell.
That's why I asked about geotagging. If you catch a fish, right, because all that data is embedded, and you go back an hour later, like, the exact grid coordinates probably not going to be the same, or the lat long, and the time's going to be different. You know, so
it's going to be close.
Yeah.
Interesting. What so you started in KBF, and then, you know, you started the CKA, which is, it is the biggest in North Carolina, correct?
It was, Queen City Kayak Bass Fishing out of Charlotte.
Okay,
is this club out of the state. So Vinny Ferreri runs that, and he does a great job. They have a big following, so they kind of pull from South Carolina. Being in Charlotte area, they have South Carolina, North Carolina anglers, and they go all over the state. CKA is more central to western, and then we have Central Carolina kayak anglers, and then we have one that's down at the east, like down at the coast, and they're a smaller club. Okay. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. I'd say North Carolina probably has the best kayak clubs out there, next to Tennessee. Texas used to be up there, and they've kind of fallen off. Virginia has some really good clubs. But for somebody trying to get into the sport, go to the local clubs and just go hang out, you know?
Yeah, we talk about it with boat fishing. Got folks that want to get into it, join a local club, and it seems like that opportunity is there. Because I know there's a lot of smaller ones too. Smaller, you know, kayak. Foothills is one local that does some stuff with cash and that runs a pretty good club. And
Bills, I forgot about those guys. Yeah, they're a newer club in the last 2 years. So good dudes over there.
So for kayak tournaments, you know, like if you're running a local club here or you're, you know, Piedmont Bass Classics, Collins, stuff like that, they got to get ramp permits in order to launch those tournaments. Do you have to do the same thing in the kayak world?
We do.
Do you?
Yeah, it's an event at a ramp launch, no matter what. Venues, like a lot of times we'll do a weigh-in or check-in at one ramp. See, the thing with kayak fishing is, like, we go out to Jordan, we may check in at Ebenezer. Okay. But kayak anglers can launch at any public ramp on the lake, so they could go to any wildlife ramp. But they have to meet up back there. And if you're going to hold an event there, awards or anything, you got to have a permit.
So that's pretty cool then. So you meet up at said ramp, and then you can trailer to whatever boat launch you want, and then
you can do that. And a lot of times now with technology and being able to do, you know, Zoom lives and, you know, things like that, we do a captain's meeting the night before, or, you know, 2 nights before during the week, you know, Thursday night or whatever for the upcoming Saturday event. So we don't have to meet up in the morning. So you're paying through PayPal or whatever, Venmo. So you're not distributing cash. We used to carry, you know, thousands of dollars worth of cash with us, and you know, we don't do that anymore. Yeah. So we those anglers can show up to the ramp, and you have a designated launch time, and then you have a designated lines in time, and then lines out, and then you have so much time after for uploading fish, and then so much time to get back and check in if that series requires you to check in after the event. So,
okay.
I mean, there's a lot to it. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but the Hobie, the Hobie BOS series, are you still, I know last year and through COVID and stuff, those registrations would open up for like 200 boats, and that joker was full in like 15 minutes. Is it still, are you still seeing that craze like with the Hobie series and some of the bigger stuff where they do limit boat numbers and it just sells out like unbelievably fast?
Yeah, so I mean, there's still that urgency. They're not selling out. Like the Caddo event that we have coming up, there's 204 anglers, and they capped the event at 225.
Okay.
It took a while to get there, but you know, Santee the other day just opened up for April 1st and 2nd.
Oh.
That event, within the first 2 minutes, I think had 140 people sign up. So it's still, people are still worried about getting in, but Hobie changed up some things this year, like if you were in the TOC or, you know, so many, like the top 50 in Angler of the Year points, they gave you preference to sign up early, kind of like some of the bigger boat series and stuff. So like you had 3 days before to sign up, and you could sign up for as many events throughout the season as you wanted. So that stopped some of the urgency. But the thing that happened when they opened these up and there was that craze, like, I've got to get on there now, the guys that were going, it kind of screwed folks, honestly, because the guys that were going after Angler of the Year points, say you were at work or had something come up, and at noon on a Thursday, the event opened up and it was selling out in 5 minutes. If you didn't have a 5-minute break, like, that just screwed your whole season. Like, you missed the event, you know, you couldn't, now you can't go, and you had to wait for somebody to drop out, and there's a waiting list. I mean, there was events that, like Santee, I think there were 73 people on the waiting list last year. It was a sold out event.
Wow.
And, you know, it's popular. Yeah. I mean,
That's
there's
awesome.
Still some urgency. Yeah.
I think it's awesome because it opens up the bigger level. Let's be honest, you and I have talked about it, and kayak fishing's piqued my interest. Maybe one of these days I'll take the leap, but the entry fees tend to be a bit lower. The upfront cost is a bit lower, and the payouts are significantly better when you look at the payouts of these tournaments. And I don't know, it's just a different way of fishing. It's something that, you know, meeting you and Casey and they're way better.
I mean, for a Hobie event now, you're looking at 200 and I think it's 285 or 295 for a 2-day event, which is still up there. The bass events are 250, KBF's like 100, I think it's 130 per now, and then you can do like the bonus bucks, Dakota Lithium double up deal. So if you get in that, it's like another $100, and basically whoever is entered in that, it's contingency money basically. But the highest, they go like the top 5 guys, they pay out if you're in that deal at the end. But
and you say that, and people might hear that and they think, wow, that's not cheap. But these are national level events, right? So you're
are
thinking
the
of like the
elite
Opens, the Elite Series, the Pro BPT, all of these, the NPFL, where you're talking about $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 entry fees per tournament, or whatever it is. You're scaling that to maybe 400, 500, and you're winning. Like I said, the payouts are significantly better.
So there was 234 people at the Bass event this weekend at Gunnersville for Bassmaster Kayak Series, and I want to say first place, it was over $13,000 for first place.
There you
Second
go.
place was like $7,000. So it's good money. It's really good money, even at the local level when you're paying $50 and $60 to enter these events. And then they have like Queen City does like the normal event, and they have I think their Elite series that you can get in, you can buy into. It's like $50 for that. So every club has something different. You got big bass that you can buy into. So I mean, you can walk away with thousands of dollars.
It's pretty wild.
He just won it down at Murray. I mean, he got first place Saturday in the first event. The second day he got second place, and then he won the Dakota Lithium overall. Mm-hmm. And he came home with like $7,000+ with a $300 entry fee.
Yeah.
So
there's
a lot of money to be won.
How was the season broken down for like the BASS and KBF and Hobie events? Like, when does it start and when does it end?
So it typically ends. KBF's a little different this year. They're going to end in June, but they started in January. Hobie a few weeks ago started in Harris, so February, and they run through October. And then we have the TOC, the Tournament of Champions. Bass is only running 5 events this year. They end in October. And then you qualify for the Bassmaster Kayak Classic. Mm-hmm. Like this year and previous years, it was in conjunction with the boat side of things. We fish on a different lake and then go to the event. They do the top 10 guys on stage at the Classic, mm-hmm. And the deal. So
do they televise any of that?
They do. They televise the awards through Bass.
Okay, but there's nothing on the water that they're doing any live coverage? So
Hobie this year started some live stuff on Facebook. So it's live from the water. Steve Fields goes around. He's the photographer, videographer. So he'll go around and he'll interview some folks and do some lives from the water. But the sport really hasn't evolved to that yet. The closest thing that we had was a series called the KFL, mm-hmm. the Kayak Fishing League. And so it was a team format, 8 guys per team, and we'd fish 4-on-4 against, other teams in the state or in surrounding states. And so we would be live through our cell phones, right? We'd put our cell phones up on a camera mount behind us, in front of us, or whatever. So you would see a live action, kind of like this. You could bring in all 8 anglers, just 3 or 4. As a guy hooks up, it's full screen. Now Cory's got a fish on. You can kind of see that. You can talk through your day and what you're doing. But kayak fishing hasn't evolved to that yet. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's just expensive.
Yeah.
Somebody would eventually.
I could see some opportunities, though. I mean, even drone footage and stuff like that, where you're hovering over and, for a significant period of time, like, especially if you guys are fishing like bed fish and stuff like that, that would be some of the coolest. I mean, I would say television, but, There
is some stuff out there. It's not televised like on TV yet, but there is some shows like KBF, the, Kayak Bass Fishing mm-hmm. show that Chad mm-hmm. does.
Yeah.
He's filmed the 10, which is a top 10 anglers, and you get to see kind of up close and personal. They have videographers on the water videotaping you, and it's pretty sweet.
That's awesome.
That is.
But yeah, the live footage stuff, that's coming. I'd say within the next 5 years, you're going to see that with GoPros being able to go live on Facebook. Like, you have some guys that do that, and through Twitch and, a couple other platforms. Some guys individually will go live, but it's a little more difficult for a camera boat to follow around a kayak.
Yep.
And guys are real. I mean, it's like in a boat, and they get territory.
That's the new model, right? Hobie's developing a new model. It's the camera. It's the camera kayak
for the camera guy,
for the crew.
Little tripod back there. Yeah.
I'll go ahead and design one. I'll sell it to you guys. So before we, this was off air, folks. We talked. You said there were some new rules changes, if I remember correctly. Yeah. You want to break that down for us?
Yeah, so a couple of the series, Bass and Hobie this year, went to designated launches, and what that means is designated launches on a map that they're going to vet out prior to the tournament. And they also allow the anglers during the official practice period to submit a public launch that they may have missed, right? So it's strictly public launches. And these are designated launches. These aren't just a dirt ramp on the side of the road or, drag through the woods or, something like that may be on private or public property. We've always said it just keeps the questions down of where somebody launched. And the other thing is some of the events that we had, there was some controversy with some guys launching, say, Kentucky Lake, for instance, with a national championship through KBF. They opened up any tributary that was connected to the lake. Well, there was guys that literally fished like 30 plus miles up a creek, and it was connected to the water. Like, you could get there by kayak. You could float through. Some boats could get through. So technically, but it's not really, at that point, it wasn't Kentucky Lake anymore.
Yeah.
And so
it was Jim Bob's Pond.
That's right. Like, it could be fed into anything. I mean, you're so far off the map. So people started looking at this and complaining, and it brought all the tournament directors together, and they're like, okay, we're going to do designated launches now. Some people don't like it. I don't really care. The drawback, the con to this is that, you have 225 people in an event. Some of these lakes, though we fish on these big bodies of water that power boats do, you're concentrating the anglers more into these designated launches.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's the negative, and people are like, I haven't run into any issues yet with these changes personally, but it's bound to happen on some of the lakes, because some of the big lakes, you're only going to have 4 or 5 major launches.
Well, I mean, to me, it would seem pretty easy. You just put boundaries. You can't, the pro tournaments do it on certain bodies of water. Like, you can't go past this mile mark, or you can't go past this bend in the river, or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
I could see that changing up. Oh, go ahead.
We've tried that boundaries deal, and it does work. And they kind of, it was a lot of back and forth. They were like, instead of boundaries, we're just going to do designated launches, because if somebody wants to go up that creek or river, they might have to motor or pedal or paddle or whatever. They might have to go 10 or 15 miles, but so be it. But now you have to go. You're not launching from a bridge or a dirt path down the side of the road. That kind of, and then you've got the hardcore guys like Drew Gregory that are like to get in those untouched waters and these areas of creeks and rivers that these fish have never even seen a lure. And that's what he loves to do, is he likes to find those waters, and that's part of kayak fishing. So it's part of kayak fishing, but there's a place and time for it, in my opinion, versus a tournament. Like, a tournament should have designated launches. Like, you're fishing this body of water. Like, if you want to go up that way, you can. And then some of the other rules, one of the other big rules that changed was the communication. So we were able to call each other on the phone, solicit information if we wanted to, until this season. So all the series have gone to no communication on the water, with electronics or in person. And that's caused kind of a big stink with people, because that's kind of taken away. I mean, even in the boat events, like, you might not be able to talk on a electronic device, but in person we could come up and say, hey man, they're biting on this, if we wanted to share that info with your buddy. So now
you can't even do that among fellow competitors.
Nope.
So what does that do with a rooming situation when people are Airbnb together and stuff?
This is only during tournament hours. So outside of the hours, so like beforehand, because we all thought that was going to be the rule, is like, hey, we Airbnb with all these guys, like, now we can't talk fishing. Like, it sucks, because there's a great, like,
guess we'll watch golf. Nothing against golf.
But the reason being is there's been some groups of folks that, people feel like they were at a disadvantage because you've got 6-8 guys that constantly communicate, and they were passing info to each other, and they were doing well, but they put this rule in place, and those same anglers are still at the top. Mm-hmm. So, like, they're it's just their group of friends they were with, but it brings, the new guy that comes in is like, hey, I can't compete against Cory Dreyer and, Casey Reed and Jody Queen, because these 3 guys talk on the phone all day. And if one of them's on them, they're like, hey man, come over here. It's a lot different. We kind of help each other out. But the one thing I don't like about it is I'm one of those anglers that I like to see people succeed. Mm-hmm. Even I'm super competitive, but if you're not catching anything, I know you've got your time and money, and you spend a week down here practicing, and like, you're struggling to catch a fish, and be like, hey man, they're biting on this color. Hey, here's a bait. go do this. At the end of the day, you still have to catch them, but I can't do that anymore now.
Right.
So like it's frustrating because I like to see those people, because I mean, that's what brings people back, man, is, you know, they have a good time. And if they drive from Maine down to Florida and they haven't caught anything, what's the chances of them coming back again?
You're absolutely right. We talked about this. I think I made this comment in a couple episodes prior to this one. It's like, secrets don't necessarily always help the industry. When you're so tight-lipped about everything, it's going to drive certain people that just don't have a tolerance for it away. So I can definitely see where that could be damaging, and it may seem like it's a very impersonal now amongst the anglers, and they're like, nope, can't talk to you, bro. You know.
Yeah.
The other thing with the designated launches, and I agree with it, but I guess where I would see this, it's going to change potentially some strategy now that you can't get into some of those areas. So now you're going to be concentrated into, you know, maybe more community style fishing and stuff like that. So I'm sure that's going to change the game.
It will, for sure. A lot of people thought that it was going to change right away, but I mean, some of these folks are still doing well, that were the guys that were off the beaten path type anglers. I mean, they're now fishing community holes and, you know, things like that. So I mean, it's time will tell. We'll see after the season how it really changes everything. Mm-hmm. So
awesome. Anything else y'all have?
Yep. I think we're going to wrap it up here in a second, Cory. So if I'm looking to get a kayak, and I know you're a Hobie guy, but Cory, sell me on a Hobie. Why is it the best kayak on the market?
So comfort, stability, and the layout of the boat. That's that's number one right there. Comfort of the boat, best seat on the market. Standability, super stable. And then the layout, you have a place for everything. You've got your rods, you've got the rod holders, you got places for your batteries, all your tackle. Like, there's a place for everything. So it's, in my opinion, the best kayak on the market.
Sweet. Is standability is that a word in the kayak industry?
Standability, yeah.
Standability, I like it. Yeah.
I like it too.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean,
standability.
What is standability? Yeah, I mean, you hear that a lot, and that's where I come up with
fishability.
How stable the boat is, and what's the standability of this boat? Like,
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I think it fits.
People want to know, can I stand up? Can I launch and stand up in the kayak? Because there's some kayaks you can't stand in. So we call it standability.
So we got standability, and then we got fishwational. Right?
Yeah.
Well,
that's good.
Fishability is, you hear it all the time on boat commercials.
Yeah.
Fishability.
The fishability of this boat, right?
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
No.
Awesome. So Cory, we really appreciate you taking time to come on. Like we do with anybody we have come on, I want to give you a minute to plug, you know, yourself. Let us know your socials for anybody that's not following or wants to, but also any sponsors that you want to plug here, and you know, give some folks an opportunity to look at some of the companies you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank you guys first and foremost. Thanks for having me on here. I really appreciated it. So look forward to being on here again, and hopefully getting you guys out in a kayak. So that'll be great.
Yeah.
We got to have a OneCast kayak day.
Yeah.
That's what I'll have to figure out.
Really. I mean, I have a small fleet of boats right now, but I'll have some more Hobies shortly, and we can get in all the different models, and wherever you guys want to fish, we'll hit one of the lakes.
I want the one that tips the worst. I want that one.
He wants the least standability.
I want the least standability.
Maybe we'll have to do it down at my lake, because then you can get out and climb over the dams and put it in another pond. There's like 7 different places you can go. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
So, and then also, I just want to thank, you know, some of my sponsors, Cash and Rods. You know, they've been a huge proponent of mine and partner. Love their rods, and Torquedo, Hobie, Catch, Z-Man. I've got a few others, Yak Attack, Dakota Lithium. They power everything for me. So
awesome.
Great guys. So check them out. And then on my socials on Facebook, I have Cory Dreyer Fishing, and same thing on Instagram. Don't have a YouTube channel really that I'm active on. I need to change that, but yeah, that's where you can check me out. And if you guys got any questions, anybody that may be listening about kayak fishing and want to get into it, you know, hit me up. So I'm always open for a phone call, text, whatever message. So give me a ring.
Awesome. Yeah. So take advantage of those companies. Make sure you check them out. You know, they let Cory do what he does on the water, and then obviously Hobie has been a target of his. He's now the Southeast rep for them, and hopefully we'll bring some footage of us trying some Hobie kayaks out. Cory sounds like he's going to set that up, so that could be fun. Check out his socials. Make sure you follow him. He's fishing, like you said, the KBF, the Hobie BOS series. Are you doing the Kayak Fishing League this year? I know you did last year. I didn't know if you were still going to.
KFL has somewhat folded.
Okay.
They have a spinoff, so I will be fishing the Hobie BOS series, a couple of the Bassmaster events, KBF, and then local CKA and CCKF.
Perfect.
But I'm heading to Caddo this coming weekend out in Louisiana, Caddo and Bistineau. Awesome fishery if you guys haven't been out there. Then I come home and then I head to Santee. And in between those, there's an event, a KBF event on Gunnersville. I don't know if I can swing that with work and family yet, but the fishing should be hot.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that happens.
You got your sights on it.
Big. Yeah, I have a lot on the schedule the next couple months. So
then you'll be.
Coming up.
I was gonna say you'll be at the Classic as well, correct?
Yeah, I'll be at the Classic working with Hobie in the dugout from there in Georgia. So they have a big booth that Hobie's doing a co-op with. So
so when you guys are at the Classic, swing by the dugout booth, holler at Cory, let them know that you saw him on the show, and if you have questions or want to see anything they might have there, he'll be there. And I know Dugout's great. We've purchased some stuff from them, and when we were
Jamie does the custom rigging that we talked about. So the $15,000-$20,000 kayaks. Jamie's like the wizard at that right now. So if you guys have any questions on rigging, hit those guys up. They're great.
Awesome. Well, yeah, folks, make sure you check Cory out on his socials. Make sure you follow us along if you're not. Give us a like, comment, subscribe. We've talked about it, but those really help us to continue to grow, help bring some money to the show so that we can continue to get better with camera gear and all that good stuff. We have our Friday lives, Fishing Friday. If you haven't seen those, make sure you check those out. We've been growing every week with the number of folks on there and have some really good conversations. So make sure you check that out if you're available Friday evenings. Other than that, that's all I have. Trey, Ben, anything you want to add on this one?
We'll see everyone on the next show. Appreciate your time.
Appreciate it, Cory.
Thank you, guys.
That's a good one.
Take care.
That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.